Okay, next up is the big one, the true beginning of the DCU. This is called Superman Legacy. This is being written by me. I'm in the middle of it. I'm having a great time doing it. And Superman will be released into theaters July 11th, 2025.
Will this be a fully exclusive 45-day theatrical window?
Fully exclusive to theaters, yes.
And will this be self-enforced? In other words, if you fall short of that?
That is the industry. It is the industry standard for self-enforcement. However, routinely, movies that underperform, the window moves a little bit. And Superman was a little shorter window, and Sinners was a little longer window, but they still could refer to it as a 45-day window.
One of my favorite comic book series from last year was Tom King's run on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And so we're going to turn that into a big science fiction epic film.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
Now, Superman is a guy who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents, whereas Supergirl in this story, she is a character who was raised on a chunk of Krypton. She watched everybody around her perish in some terrible way, so she's a much more jaded character.
You serious?
And now you know why a movie that needs $400 million to break even got just $38 million at opening. It's going to tank.
Disaster, absolute disaster. Wonder why. If that's not a warning to Hollywood, well, nothing is.
Oh, well, here we are again, ladies and gentlemen, and I wish it were under better circumstances. We are only a few months past from the disaster that was Warner Brothers' movie called The Bride, and already we're somewhere new. If you live under a rock or you just don't care, Supergirl opened just over a week ago to applause and standing ovations and soaring reviews and confirmation that James Gunn himself has not only saved the DCU, but in fact, cinema itself in one swoop. And if you're still with me, I'm totally kidding. It was an abysmal failure and disaster, and I'm all for it.
You had me at hello.
Why? Well, because nobody asked for this movie. And say what you want, but the facts speak for themselves. In fact, if you go further, no one asked for the comic by Tom King this movie is based on at its inception. So sure, it would be easy to ride the rotten critic scores, or blame Trump, or the patriarchy, the studios, the comedians, the chuds, the content creators, the incels, the sexists, the racists, the misogynists, or whatever is convenient this week. Because that's all anyone says now. That's never been my drive, because my focus is the financing and how this hits not only future studio films, the rest of the DC slate and whatever that's going to look like, and the smaller films that have nothing to do with any of that will pay the price. So if you know me, you know where I come from in that everything is a numbers game. If you know me, I've also made no apologies about how I feel when it comes to the quality of something and how important that is to the smaller niche film communities. I've put literal blood, sweat, and tears into this business for 13 years, which lands me ironically at 2013 when I graduated college, and also the year that Man of Steel came out. Boy, are we a long way removed from when film was at its peak, and TV with it. So with Lanterns, the Jimmy Olsen and Gorilla Grodd show, and the Bane and Deathstroke movie on deck for DC, there's a lot to unpack. And if the last two movies from this rebrand are any consolation of what is coming next, then there is no shot that it survives.
No chance, that's what you got.
But Sean, you're a finance guy, a consultant. You shouldn't lower yourself to movie reviews and blah, 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 my ass.
Well, fuck you.
You're right, which is why this isn't necessarily a review, because reviews or opinions and assholes are all the same in that we all have them. Every day I'm really just trying to save the industry from itself.
You serious?
Sure, might sound cheesy. Fine. You don't have to take my word for it, but just look at the last 10 years of cinema and TV. Hell, the last 5. Shit, the last 2. For every one good movie or show, there is at least 15 bad ones on either side of them. The shills, the critics, whoever. They won't admit it because it doesn't fit the status quo or the narrative. But it will always be a numbers game. That old saying of follow the money. And while the studios will continue to blame the toxic fans, while the feminists blame the sexists and men, and while the soy boys blame the Snyder bros, one truth cannot be denied right now in 26, on this day, in this moment. The industry is in trouble and has no one else to blame but itself. No amount of gaslighting, grifting, shilling, labs, classes, college degrees, podcasts, or YouTube videos of John Campea telling people to look at Tobey Maguire's dick is going to change or save it.
But look closely at Tobey Maguire's dick.
See? He said it. There's no rebuild here. There's a teardown. And then there's whoever's left standing in the rubble with a camera and an actual idea. That's where it always was. So let me be clear about my taste, because I'm not even a comic reader. I just love a really good movie when it's actually good. And I've lived long enough to know that both good movies and terrible movies exist. The difference today is that most of them are between bad and terrible. And it's not only driving fans away, but the consumer and the institutional investor. I'm old enough to know that Superman Returns and Man of Steel, while not perfect, were both better than what we got last year. So the lack of faith in both 2025 Superman and now Supergirl has nothing to do with it being just another James Gunn movie made by James Gunn for James Gunn and his wife, boyfriend. I saw Scooby-Doo in theaters, which was written and executive produced by James Gunn, and I saw it multiple times as a kid in the theaters. I'll watch damn near anything if it's fun, or at least trying to be entertaining. And yet, when it was announced as part of the larger Gods and Monsters slate, I was not sold on Supergirl. And to be honest, I don't think they were either, because it was the last film that they announced. But Sean, Wonder Woman 2017, girl power and feminism all the way, and women get it done, and blah, 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 my ass.
You idiot.
Yes, I saw Wonder Woman opening weekend when it came out, and I enjoyed it. The movie worked then because it wasn't trying to be anything else other than just metal. If you saw the movie, or even read the comics, which I didn't, then you'd know that Wonder Woman, aka Princess Diana of Themyscira, is an Amazonian warrior princess and one of DC Comics' founding superheroes, who operates as a global ambassador of peace, truth, and equality. That's pretty simple, right? That movie worked because it wasn't selling itself short. It was made for both men and women. It showed you could put an attractive woman with flaws on screen who didn't need to be stronger than Superman, or smarter than Batman, or faster than the Flash, or superior to Aquaman, or more sophisticated and tragic than Cyborg. She worked on her own and is part of a team, which is the foundation of why she exists in the first place. Wonder Woman 2017 didn't need to be turned into some modern feminist, rage-baiting, edgy punk rock lesbian allegory for taking down the white male patriarchy. She succeeded by actually being a hero. She didn't need to call Ares a bitch while running away from the fight to drink some more and see how many members of the League she could bang in a weekend. That shit has never been cool, funny, edgy, or inspiring. But that's modern feminism in a nutshell, and I'm not apologizing for saying it, because all modern feminism has actually delivered is, well, this.
Your favorite dish?
My favorite dish? I like mugs because they're very comfortable in your hand and they hold the hot things that you don't have to touch. So, coffee or hot tea.
And this.
I'm gonna be a dad.
And this.
It is so annoying how the guys that I like don't like me, but the guys that I don't fucking give a flying rat's bumhole in is all of a sudden like, so when are we gonna see each other? Here's some flowers. I love you so much. Love me. And I'm just like, Why? Literally, no. I want the one that doesn't want me. Can't I just like the one that likes me?
And this.
Oh my god!
Gorlock the fucking Destroyer. That's the feminist legacy. So for Variety to come out with, and I quote, "Supergirl stinks. Why does Hollywood keep failing female superheroes?" End quote. Understand that that headline and the article is not pointed at the Seth Rogans or the Mark Ruffalos or the John Leguizamos, those devout male feminists. Those assholes aren't running out to the theater to watch this movie unless their agent is telling them to post about it, and in which case they get paid for it, if they're invited to the premiere, or if the press is there to watch them do it. This headline is attacking you, the fans, and the true comic readers who understand that a superhero is an inherently masculine concept, and the character requires a degree of imposing physicality and menace to pull off. But Sean, the actress, attacked Christians' dads and blah, 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 my ass. Yes, you're right. She did. And as a practicing Catholic, the last group on earth I'd let get to me is Hollywood, which is nothing more than depraved sycophants, cultists, atheists, cons, scammers, backstabbers, pedophiles, and people with no moral authority or empathy toward anyone but their fart-sniffing selves. That's the lane they chose, and it won't ever change, so attack us if you will. But understand that good films still exist outside of that system, and it's my job to build them. And while Millie Alcock has shown herself to be a total idiot in public, or at least her publicist has, she was actually great in House of the Dragon. I never thought she was an unattractive person, but I'll say she nailed the look of centuries of Targaryen inbreeding and played the part well. But again, that's not the problem here. I never had any issue with her being cast, as I always tell anyone building in the independent space, cast, for the most part, does not move a film forward, and this is a clear example of one actress's success in one thing not translating to the next. That being said, Millie Alcock still went out of her way to alienate, insult, and attack the superhero and Supergirl fanbase, which, ironically, is mostly men.
Not a great plan.
Which now brings me to this absolute shit, and I'm sorry, but I had to watch, so now you have to.
The movie itself is based off one of my favorite modern comics. The bar is so high on what Woman of Tomorrow is, and this is the first review I've ever given where I said, like, hey, I think read the comic after. Like, in the history of me doing this, I've never said, wait. That's because it's going to feel more like an extended cut if you read the comic after versus where is that scene every few minutes if you watch the movie after reading the comic. I do think the comic is a better experience, but I think the movie has merit that really can't be enjoyed in this climate. And that's been my struggle is I didn't think this was the greatest thing ever. I didn't think it was the worst thing ever, but it's a comic book movie, so one must. Millie Alcock's great. I'm really excited for girls to have a hero that actually has depth and nuance as a woman. I'm way more concerned with the women of tomorrow than them adapting Woman of Tomorrow. I've got the comic. If I want the comic, I want little girls to have a hero, and then the stupidest people were all like, there are female heroes. It was the 21st Marvel movie till we got a female-led superhero film. 21 movies in. I'm proud of DC for doing it their second movie, but of course it's going to have this kind of response. I'm also speaking to people that are going to see a girl that actually has something to say and actually has an experience and actually has trauma and actually has an eye line of connectivity while still being super. Sorry, I never related to a goddess from Paradise Island. I think she's awesome. I love that character. I think even that's a better movie. But I don't relate to Wonder Woman. I don't think if I have a daughter, she will at first. She'll be like, cool, a hero. Like she'll play Wonder Woman. But I think Supergirl is more relatable. I barely touched the internet this week, but it's so loud. I'm just pre-exhausted for women and girls getting movies that are okay when I want better for them. And so I feel automatically defensive of like, I want to have all of these things to praise. And so those are coming out louder, even though the movie I thought was okay.
So this soy guy on a movie podcast just told us the reason people are shitting on the new Supergirl movie is because it's one of the rare hero movies for girls, like Wonder Woman 2017. So the discourse is a lot, and we should all calm down and appreciate it anyway. This is what the culture war has turned movie talk into. Instead of the script is dog shit for reasons A, B, and C, the tone is grim and depressing, and the hero is a blackout drunk anti-hero who spends half the movie hungover on copy and paste Red Sun planets, but instead we get the participation trophy defense. You're only mad because it's for girls. Bullshit. Like I just said, Wonder Woman 2017 already proved a female-led superhero movie can crush it when it's actually good. And that has nothing to do with the fans. Look within at the industry. The difference isn't gender. It's whether the movie is any good. And you can say that about any film in any genre, in or out of the industry. So whatever part you're playing in the culture war, understand this. You didn't make criticism radioactive. Soy boys like Koi made the lazy defense acceptable. Its important representation became the shield for mediocre product, and now we're supposed to pretend a sloppy trauma dump anti-hero story is the empowering moment for little girls? Grow the fuck up. Make a good movie. The rest takes care of itself. Don't believe me? Ellen Ripley, Sarah Connor, Mallory Kane, Beatrix Kiddo, Evelyn Salt, Laura Croft, Jordan O'Neill, Celine, Katniss Everdeen, and Elastigirl. All strong, capable, badass women any little girl can look up to and aspire to be.
Well, how about that?
And not one of them needed to be drunk to do it. So for anyone raising money in this space now, or the super niche independent space, this film is what investors are going to look at going forward when they decide whether to back your personal trauma story that you want to turn into a $5 million gamble.
Not a great plan.
So here's how it goes. And you already know because it's the same every time. There are already 1,000 videos out there of this movie, mine included. You're going to see a thumbnail of Millie Alcock's face, and the video is going to be deciding that the only reason a movie about Superman's cousin is tanking is that the chuds are on it, the toxic fans are bearing it, and that men are frightened of women in a cape. Anything but the film itself. The film is a masterpiece, and you're simply not evolved enough to receive it. Floating above all of it, the gun faithful, who've decided this man cannot miss. That every flop under his leadership is just a seed, and that there's a plan so intricate that the failure is secretly step 4. And you can't see it because that's a you problem. Then the cope that says this movie will make it back in streaming and the merchandise. And before the weekend was even over, Peter Safran went to the New York Times and just called it one component of a broader long-term strategy he's still confident in, which is the sentence you give when the building is on fire and you just happen to own the building.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
The New York Times then went and did what the New York Times does in blaming, you guessed it, misogyny. And in their own words, and I quote, perhaps reflecting a resurgent misogyny among the core fan base, which is largely male, end quote. So now the think pieces about what Supergirl says about the death of the monoculture, or Gen Z, or the male gaze, or late stage, or whatever. Everyone gets a turn, everyone brings a theory, and the theory is always about something other than the 100 minutes none of us will ever get back that played in the actual theater.
It doesn't work that way!
Not one of these people, the woke skulls, the defenders, the priesthood, the think piece guy, goes near the only question that decides whether this character ever flies again in who was this actually for? So let's go near it, because the financing situation is where everything matters. Here is what we have at time of recording. Supergirl grossed an official $37.1 million domestically and $62.6 million globally. The production budget was $175 million or more, and reported as high as $186 million net, before marketing spend around $120 million. Tracking had already dropped from the $50 million range into the $40 million range in the final weeks leading up to the film, and the film still came in under that. To break even in theaters, it needs to clear at least $350 million worldwide, and it is not getting there. The reported theatrical loss runs anywhere from $80 million to $125 million, and it widens if the film never reaches $200 million. It currently sits with a B- cinema score below The Marvels, The Flash, and the 2011 Green Lantern. 59% male and 65% male over 25. The young movie the movie was built for and marketed for, down all the way to the Ulta Beauty tie-in, did not buy tickets. On post-track, 26% of the audience said they came for Alcock, while 49% said they came because it is part of a franchise they already follow. Men. Which means that the label sold the tickets. The basis of this movie was Tom King and Bilquis Evely's niche Women of Tomorrow, which was a 2021 series that sold to adult comic readers who wanted its specific tone. That readership is real, but it is small, and it is never scaled into the kind of crowd that Phil's theaters once adapted. And to go beyond that, the film actually made it worse by reworking that character into something more cynical, by restructuring the story and changing the ending rather than just sticking with a Supergirl with more experience and a guiding role in the central relationship. The readers who knew the book did not recognize it, and nobody outside that base, like me, had any reason to show up and buy a ticket outside of the fandom.
Well, how about that?
And the best part is, the screenplay was written by Anna Nogueira.
Who?
Yes, and like me, you're asking that same question. You have never heard of this person because she has no produced features to her name, but she does have a few stage plays under her belt, some acting work in minor obscure roles and things you don't watch, and a credited written short called We Win.
What's your point, Vanessa?
And yet, James Gunn and Peter Safran gave her a golden shower, opportunity with a price tag of $175 million from their new studio that has barely existed for 5 minutes. So to say she wasn't the best writer for this film is quite an understatement. So between her and Leslie Headland writing things they shouldn't be, they just sent women back another 100 years. Go feminism, you win again. But don't worry, she's also planning on ruining the Wonder Woman reboot as well.
Oh shit, here we go again.
So what makes this worse is that whether they knew it or not at the time of her hiring, they set this person up for failure, and her career moving forward is going to be clouded by that decision forever. They went as far as betting Craig Gillespie's name on her by banking on the IP to cover for whatever the script couldn't carry. Which brings us to now. It didn't, and now everyone downstream of that decision pays for it. We should also not be so naive to forget that James Gunn is nothing more than an arrogant child in a grown man's body who sits on X either baiting fans or lashing out about facts that don't come from his own account. And that's not when he's rage tweeting about fondling little boys in a movie theaters while watching The Expendables. Why am I saying this? Well, the facts speak for themselves. He gets fired by Marvel for being a total creep. 2 months later, he gets hired by Warner Brothers and he decides to reboot The Suicide Squad, which ended up being a $185 million flop, which was also a sequel or a reboot. In any case, he spins it off into Peacemaker. Then he goes and gets rehired by Marvel to finish Guardians 3, and look, I personally enjoyed that. So then Warner Brothers hands him the keys to the entire DC empire as co-CEO with full creative control. And what does he do with it? Immediately fires Henry Cavill, hypes The Flash as one of the greatest superheroes ever made right before it bombed, stuffs every project with his wife, his brother, his friends, launches the Gods and Monsters, starting with an animated series nobody watched or asked for. And then he decides he's going to write and direct a Superman movie that was supposed to be the foundation of a whole new universe. What we got instead? Bland, safe, middle of the road flops. There was no cultural reset, and well, there was no blockbuster money. Just constant retcons to protect his canon, inner circle, casting, and DC brand that's still treading water instead of flying. This was never some grand artistic vision, but instead one angry guy's ego trip dressed up as a unified universe. He survived the firing, the backlash, the second chances, and the moment he got real power, he used it to settle scores, protect his friends, and build a kingdom that, well, still feels small. Call it a testament to uncontrolled ego. And now, as Warner Bros. Sits mid-acquisition by Paramount Skydance, that same division arrives as a weakened, underperforming piece of the portfolio rather than the crown jewel. The new owners inherit a DC brand that was supposed to be fixed and instead remains, well, directionless and commercially soft.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do?
Exactly the kind of liability that gets scrutinized, restructured, or gutted when new investment and new leadership take over. Which brings us right back to Supergirl.
Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
A 9-figure loss on the DC slate lands inside that diligence, next to The Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, Creature Commandos, and Superman. A set of titles with all shared Guardians of the Galaxy tone, and yet no through line a buyer can name. Back to Tom King, who Supergirl got adapted, he is heavily involved with the DC Studios live-action series Lanterns. So every one of those signals goes into how the slate gets valued in that sale. So here's what happens now. The scale of a loss on a single title removes the profit contribution from stronger releases in the same universe and requires adjustments across the rest of the slate. I'm looking at you, Bane and Deathstroke. Tracking erosion of this scale occurs when paid awareness fails to convert into ticket commitments and organic conversation remains contained. When advanced metrics move downward by double digits, the combination of marketing reach and audience interest is not meeting the threshold required for the modeled opening. Pre-sales followed the same trajectory, and the opening weekend confirmed it with a second-place $37 million domestic finish on a production budget exceeding $175 million. The audience that attended did not expand into the broader demographic participation needed to justify that spend. Competition from Toy Story 5 added measurable pressure. The animated sequel carried strong holdover performance and multi-generational appeal that captured prime screens and family spending. Supergirl entered the same corridor without the cultural urgency or differentiated positioning required to secure comparable attendance. And all while adjusting the gross for 2026 ticket prices and inflation does not alter the underlying fiscal reality in that the revenue generated simply does not support the scale of capital deployed. For outsider investors and co-financers, the precedent is direct. High budget extensions of existing intellectual property that enter the market with softening presale data carry elevated downside exposure. When openings settle in this range on tentpole costs, the probability of recovering the full investment through theatrical runs drops sharply. Capital providers incorporate this data by raising required thresholds on pre-sales, test audience results, and conservative comparable modeling. They place greater weight on structures that protect downside through tax credits, international pre-sales, and reduce theatrical commitments. Projects that cannot meet those adjusted gates either shrink in scope or do not receive funding at that originally contemplated level. Warner Bros. Shareholders record the earnings impact in the current period, and a loss this size on a DC title moves quarterly results, forward guidance, and the questions around how spend at this level gets authorized. The people who greenlit this production own the outcome, and the next set of decisions will run under tighter proof of demand review. In the context of Paramount and Warner Bros. Combination, the implications extend beyond a single release. Merger processes evaluate content pipelines, library value, and future production economics under combined ownership. A high-profile theatrical loss in the DC slate underscores the need for consistent capital discipline across both organizations' libraries and unified future slate. So, here's a solution. Let's look at the real problem here first, because if you read the trades or you scroll through LinkedIn, every grifter and shill will tell you the exact same thing. Go build an audience for your movie before it exists. And yet, it's a completely empty trope because you cannot aggregate a massive fictional fan base for an unmade asset on sheer passion for your own project. The other faction will tell you to rely on the legacy system. Go collect distributor letters, get some international pre-sales, or bank on a festival run. And yet, the last few years have proven that the traditional indie playbook is completely dead. And I myself have been saying that for the last 18 months. The old safety nets are gone, and the legacy metrics don't predict a damn thing anymore. Warner Brothers had James Gunn sitting right there in front of them using the highest level legacy studio tools available, and he lost the studio an insane amount of money. And he'll keep his job. So what is the actual mechanism that works in 2026? If the macro system is broken, everything must be executed on a literal, hyper-individual basis. You don't try to build a massive audience for a film that doesn't exist, and you can't guess beyond that. You run a hyper-localized individual asset micro-testing. Before you authorize investment, or worse, demand a capital call, you deploy targeted, quantitative proof-of-demand mechanics into isolated, high-conviction micro-corridors. You extract the data from a controlled microcosm of the market to prove that a specific demographic will actually invest capital or commit attention to this exact project before you even mention the word cost. And finally, you trade assumptions for verified, localized conversion signals. Now, I understand a producer will look at those criteria and think, great, I'll go scrape some open source window decay data, download a template, and run the micro-testing myself. But you can't. First, because you do not possess the institutional data architecture or the clean, cross-border transactional baselines required to isolate real conversion variables from the noise. And second, and more importantly, you are grading your own homework. You are financially and emotionally incentivized to see a hit. The moment a filmmaker or a biased financer tries to run their own risk pricing, they unconsciously bend the data to validate themselves. Real risk mitigation requires a clinical third-party architecture. It requires a hard, independent asset clearance review that treats your project as a completely unique asset class. So, here's the lesson, which is a bit more personal. When it comes to Supergirl, and especially Superman, and looking directly at what they explicitly stand for, the core of their importance is that they are the living enforcement mechanism for pure foundational American civil ideals. Their power structure is designed to show what unconditional altruism looks like. They have the strength of the gods, and yet they choose to protect. The phrase "the American way" in classic comic runs defines it as a set of universal human rights and freedom, equality, and neighborly kindness. They serve as a mirror to humanity, challenging regular people to live up to those high moral standards. So, fuck truth and justice and whatever as the basis for the current Supergirl movie because they share the exact same motto: truth, justice, and the American way. But they approach it from two different generational angles, serving as a perfect metaphor for the film industry. Superman represents old Hollywood, the classic studio system. He is the steady, unshakable anchor, the idealist who believes the system can work if people simply choose to do the right thing. Historically, the major studios were the baseline institution of global culture, acting as gatekeepers of quality, greenlighting mid-budget dramas, original ideas, and sweeping epics.
Right? Wrong.
But over the last decade, the corporate suits completely abandoned this institutional responsibility. Instead of maintaining absolute clarity about what makes cinema great, they handed the keys over to Wall Street algorithms, tech conglomerates, and endless, soulless IP franchises.
Not a great plan.
By chasing the short-term streaming data and erasing finished movies for tax write-offs, the anchor broke. The institution proved it no longer believes in its own system. Supergirl represents the reality check and the independent scene. She has seen a civilization completely collapse. She brings a sharper, more urgent energy to the motto. She represents the younger, fiercely protective fighter who will actively challenge corrupt authority figures rather than just waiting for the system to correct itself. The indie scene is the ultimate refugee of Hollywood's collapse. Independent filmmakers, localized film festivals, and art house theaters are literally watching the cinematic civilization burn down around them, bearing the brunt of the devastation caused by studio greed.
That's not my problem. It's yours.
And because indie filmmakers aren't protected by massive corporate safety nets, they have to bring that urgent energy just to survive. They are the fighters keeping original storytelling, practical filmmaking, and risky, thought-provoking art alive on shoestring budgets. While the studios put out sterile, risk-adverse blockbusters, the independent scene actively challenges that by proving that audiences still crave human stories. Historically, a healthy Superman and a stable, profitable studio system created a trickle-down economy that allowed Supergirl to thrive. Studios used to buy indie films at festivals like Sundance or fund smaller boutique labels to discover new talent. The current tragedy is with the studio system completely decimated by streaming debts and corporate mismanagement, that institutional safety net is gone. So here's what that means for you. When the institution was healthy, it caught you. A studio could eat a bad bet and, well, they could keep the lights on. A good film got bought at a festival and carried it to an audience by someone with money and reach. A mistake didn't end you because somebody above you could afford to be wrong on your behalf. That net is gone. You're out in the cold now. No studio is coming to buy you, no boutique label funded to find you, and nobody above you to absorb that blow. The bet is yours. All of it. And if you're wrong about whether the audience exists, you catch the floor alone. In 2026, both sides of the transaction need an objective read on demand, and neither side can give it to you using old school parameters. The producer is incentivized to inflate the value of their attachments, and the financer is looking to hedge exposure through aggressive recoupment positions. Real risk mitigation requires a clinical third-party architecture that treats your project as a completely unique asset class. We have to look at the market through three brutal realities that traditional film packaging completely ignores. First, the invisible window decay. Most projects are modeled on historic grosses that are fundamentally decoupled from how fast theatrical and premium VOD windows compress right now. If you do not have institutional baselines to measure the current transaction velocity of hyper-selective viewers in your exact sub-corridor, you are flying completely blind in week 2. Second, attachment distortion. Producers love to stack elements and assume value. But in the current market, talent attachments and package components are completely insulated from actual consumer transaction intent. If you cannot isolate the raw asset from your industry, your underwriting is built on soft assumptions. And third, the toxic waterfall. Standard pitches treat financing like an optimization model from 5 years ago. They fail to calculate how current macroeconomic volatility, shifting bridge structures, and aggressive friction completely choke the domestic ancillary waterfall. By the time the capital structure settles, equity is wiped out before a single dollar of yield is generated. That's why real self-assessment takes an outside party. That's the work at Wrap Consulting. That is what it means to build a risk-adjusted project profile. It is an unconventional, institutional, independent risk review designed for a market where every project stands or falls completely on its own fiscal structure. What is your risk-adjusted project profile? Everything you have been told about this process was built to keep you chasing access, validation, and hope. It was never built to tell you the truth. Return that shit to its sender.
Here I come. Here I come.
If you like this video, thank you for watching. I invite you to please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't, well, thanks for watching anyways. I will see you all next time.